On November 25th, 1988, a 17-year-old girl finished her part-time shift at a plastic molding factory and began the walk to the train station. The streets of Adachi Ward were cold. Winter was settling over Tokyo. Her name was Junko Furuta. She was a senior in high school. She had been accepted to a job at an electronics company. She would start after graduation in March. She never arrived at the station that night. What happened instead began with a chance encounter on the street. A boy from her old middle school. A motorcycle ride she should never have accepted. What happened over the next 44 days would become the most notorious juvenile crime in Japanese history. 4 teenage boys, a 2-story house where parents slept upstairs, and a question that has haunted Japan for nearly 40 years. How did no one stop it? The house sat at 3-9-14 Jonan in the Adachi Ward of Tokyo. 2 floors, a working-class street. Narrow. Quiet. This was 1988. Japan's bubble economy was at its peak. Land values were soaring. The Nikkei was climbing toward its historic high. But that wealth did not reach Jonan. This was the Tokyo of factory workers and part-time shifts, of families who kept to themselves. The house belonged to the Miyano family. Upstairs, the parents slept. Downstairs, their 18-year-old son Hiroshi had claimed a second floor for himself. He had dropped out of high school. He had connections to the local yakuza. He had a girlfriend who visited regularly. And he had 3 friends who came and went as they pleased. Joe Ogura, 17. Shinji Minato, 16. Yasushi Watanabe, 17. The 4 of them had already built a reputation in the neighborhood. Petty crime, intimidation, the kind of boys people cross the street to avoid. But nothing they had done before prepared anyone for what they were about to do. Junko Furuta was born on November 22nd, 1971. She was the eldest of 3 children. Her family lived in Misato, Saitama Prefecture, just north of Tokyo. She attended Yashio Minami High School. Her teachers described her as diligent. Her classmates remembered her as kind. She worked part-time at the plastic molding factory to save money. She had already been accepted to work at an electronics company after graduation. She had plans. She had a future. On the evening of November 25th, she left work just after 7 p.m. She walked toward the train station, heading home. Miyano and Watanabe were nearby, loitering on the street. Miyano recognized her from middle school. He approached. He offered her a motorcycle ride. She accepted. She had no reason to suspect danger. She knew him. Or she thought she did. They did not drive toward the station. They drove toward a warehouse near the river. Miyano beat her there. When they finished, they brought her to the Miyano house. They would not let her leave. What happened inside that house over the next 44 days has been documented in court records, testimonies, police reports, photographs. The details are clinical. They are also difficult to read. The 4 boys subjected Junko to torture that escalated day by day. Beatings with fists and with objects. Burns from cigarettes and lighters pressed against her skin. Cuts to her arms and legs. They forced her to drink large quantities of alcohol. They inserted foreign objects into her body. They hung her from the ceiling by her wrists and used her as a punching bag. When she collapsed, they waited for her to regain consciousness and continued. They fed her live cockroaches. They forced her to eat large quantities of food and then beat her stomach. They poured lighter fluid on her legs and set her on fire. Her injuries were so severe that her face swelled beyond recognition. She could no longer close her mouth. She lost the ability to walk without assistance, to eat without pain. By late December, she could no longer speak in complete sentences. Her body was shutting down. The boys called her their toy. They documented everything. Dozens of photographs exist. They are evidence. They are also trophies. Nobody knows why the parents never came downstairs. The Miyano family home was not large. 2 floors. Wooden construction. Sound travels in a house like that. The boys were not quiet. The violence was not hidden. Miyano's mother and father slept in the house every night. They prepared meals. They went to work. They lived their lives while Junko was held on the floor beneath them. When questioned later by police, they claimed they had not known. They said Junko never called for help. They said they thought the sounds were their son and his friends being rowdy. This was their defense. They never came downstairs. Miyano's girlfriend visited the house multiple times during those 44 days. She saw Junko. She saw her injuries. She saw what was being done. She did not call the police. She would later testify that she was afraid of Miyano. 2 other boys were brought to the house during this period. They were invited to participate in the abuse. They did. They also said nothing. 44 days. A house in a Tokyo suburb. No one made a single phone call. On the night of January 4th, 1989, the 4 boys played mahjong. Junko was on the floor. She had been tortured for hours. At some point, someone looked over and noticed she was no longer moving. She was dead. The exact time of death was never determined. The official cause was traumatic shock. Her body had been pushed beyond what it could endure. She was 17 years old. The boys did not call an ambulance. They did not call anyone. They went to a hardware store the next day. They purchased a 55-gallon steel drum. They purchased 50 kilograms of concrete mix, plastic bags, rope. They wrapped her body in blankets. They placed it inside the drum. They poured the concrete over her. They sealed her inside. Then they drove the drum to a concrete plant in Koto Ward, the industrial edge of Tokyo, a place of rust and silence. They left it there among the debris. Then they went home. The drum sat at the plant for 19 days. No one noticed it. No one asked what was inside. On January 23rd, Hiroshi Miyano and Joe Ogura were arrested on an unrelated charge, the assault of another young woman. During questioning, Miyano mentioned a different crime. He told the police where to look. On January 24th, officers found the drum at the Koto plant. They broke through the concrete. Inside was the body of Junko Furuta. She had been dead for 3 weeks. Her family had been searching for her since November. They had filed missing person reports. They had called hospitals. They had waited by the phone. They learned what happened to their daughter when the police called them to identify her remains. The arrests followed quickly. All 4 boys were taken into custody. They were charged with kidnapping, assault, and murder, but they were tried as juveniles under Japanese law. This detail, the words tried as juveniles, would become the center of everything that followed. The trial revealed what court records would describe as an act of unprecedented brutality. Dozens of witnesses testified. Neighbors who had heard sounds. The girlfriend who had visited and said nothing. The other boys who had been invited to participate. The parents who slept upstairs. And yet the juvenile classification limited what the court could do. In July 1990, the Tokyo Family Court handed down its sentences. Hiroshi Miyano, the ringleader, received 20 years. Joe Ogura received 5 to 10 years. Shinji Minato received 5 to 9 years. Yasushi Watanabe received 3 to 4 years. Japan absorbed the verdict with a kind of stunned silence. 44 days of sustained torture. Death by traumatic shock. A body sealed in concrete and left in an industrial lot. The maximum sentence any of them received was 20 years. No one was charged as an adult. Miyano's parents were never charged with any crime. They claimed ignorance. The court accepted their account. Joe Ogura was released in 1999. He served his sentence and walked free. He would be arrested again in 2004. Assault. Sentenced again. Released again. He reportedly lives in Japan under a different name. Miyano's mother sent her son letters during his incarceration. Supportive letters. Miyano himself was released in 2009 after serving his full term. He was 39 years old. He had spent more than half his life in prison. He was rearrested in 2013 for fraud. Sentenced again. Yasushi Watanabe and Shinji Minato served their sentences and disappeared into ordinary life. The parents who slept through 44 days of screams faced no consequences, no charges, no trial, no public reckoning. They remain free. This is the part of the case that refuses to settle. Not the violence, not the light sentences, but the silence. The silence of the parents upstairs. The silence of the girlfriend who visited and said nothing. The silence of the other boys who participated and walked away. The silence of a neighborhood where a girl was slowly killed and no one picked up a phone. Junko Furuta's case did change Japan. It led to reform. The juvenile law was revised. Sentencing guidelines were toughened. But reforms do not restore what was taken. Her family received her remains. They did not receive justice. The men who killed her have served their time. They work jobs. They walk streets. They carry names that are not supposed to be spoken aloud. And the question that lingers nearly 40 years later is not who did it. It is who let it happen. A house full of people. 44 days. And silence. What that silence says about the rest of us is still waiting for an answer.